This is Ed Rep Radio, presented by Eastman Music Company. This is Ed Rep Radio, a podcast to bring you ideas and information from industry experts you can use on the road every day. Presented by Eastman Music Company, and I'm your host, Shane Duell. This is the second episode with Andy Wilson, who is someone I've had the honor of calling a friend and mentor for several years now. In the previous episode, Andy talked about some best practices and mindset for being a great sales rep to your customer. In this discussion, we're going to shift the topic to sales leadership. The challenges faced and skills needed for leading people are different from being a sales rep, so we decided to dedicate the next hour specifically to the topic of leadership. Many listeners of EdRep Radio are sales leaders, EdRep managers, or owners, or maybe you're a sales rep or EdRep who wants to work your way towards a leadership role in your company. This episode's for you. As I mentioned in the last episode, many of the best lessons on the topic of sales and leadership in my life have come from outside the music industry. Andy has decades of experience as a sales rep, sales leader, and leader of leaders, and I think you're going to really love his approach to leadership. Andy Wilson, welcome back if you heard the first episode with Andy. So glad you're here again.
Thanks, Shane. Looking forward to our time together.
Yeah. Now, this topic, if you listen to the first episode with Andy on best practices for sales representatives, this topic, I think, is one that is very near your heart because you and I have had some great conversations about this. It's about sales leadership, sales management. And before we dig into it, just kind of as a recap, if someone is hearing your voice for the first time, didn't hear the other episode, can you tell us a bit about your background and your career and what you're doing now?
Yeah. Spent my entire career in sales. I would like to say this, like most salespeople, I didn't choose sales. It sort of stumbled into it. It was not expecting to be a salesperson, but found I had the right aptitude for it and the right personality and the right sort of drive and stumbled into it. And it's been a great career and loved it in every way. I started out really as a rep selling office furniture, and then for an office furniture manufacturer for many, many years in the New England marketplace out of Boston. Spent probably 22 or 24 years there, and then moved out to Colorado 8 years ago to take a leadership role with my company to run the mountain division. That's what they call it at the time, at a region. And then have been promoted to vice president. Have done that for the last 4 years, leading the West, which is everything from Chicago to California.
Leading a sales team?
A sales team. Well, leading sales leaders then.
Oh,
so
leading
really,
leaders.
Yeah, so really moving from direct seller to leading salespeople to leading leaders is a good way to think about my career. And then recently left that role to start a sales solutions consultancy business. It really works with small and medium-sized businesses to help them with their sales infrastructure, sales strategy, sales execution. Most smaller businesses don't really have a very robust process for that stuff. So taking my knowledge experience of 30 years in sales with a company that provides some fantastic sales solutions called Sales Acceleration, and helping companies really sort of get their revenue the way they want to, which is fantastic. Love what I do. Been really blessed in my role, in every role. They've been great learning opportunities, and I'm a learner at heart. So it's been an awesome career. Couldn't ask for anything better, except for maybe office furniture. That's a tough industry, certainly for the last 4 years, to say the least.
Right. Everybody's working from home now. Right.
Exactly. Totally.
Well, over the years I've known you, Andy, I've so thoroughly enjoyed talking to you about this topic, about sales and sales leadership. You've been a great mentor to me, and I'm looking forward to putting this in a recording for the world to hear.
Fun.
Because you're just so good at it, and you're very wise with your approach in so many things. And the first episode that we recorded, it'll probably in the listing of in the podcast, probably the episode just before this one, we were talking about sales and sales soft skills, like you called them in that episode, and some mindsets and basically for salespeople working with their customers or influencers. But this is different. We're talking about management, sales leadership. And I want to start with, what's the difference
Mm-hmm.
between the skill set and the mindset of a salesperson versus a sales leader?
Right. Yeah. Well, first, I just want to say thanks, Shane. And, certainly it's a two-way street. I learned a ton from you. And if any wisdom that I've gained is from the mistakes that I've made along the journey, to say the least. But I guess that gives me some wisdom that I don't keep making the same mistakes. It's interesting. It's a great question. And I think the best way for me to frame this is my experience. Here I was a seller for a company for 18 years in the Boston marketplace, very successful. I was, 2 times sales rep of the year, always on stage consistently. And I must say, I didn't think I did anything special, thought I could probably do things differently, and I probably should be doing things differently, when I was a sales rep. And when I took a leadership role, I assumed that others did things the way I did it and approached things the same way I did. And that was absolutely not true. Right? I found that everybody does it a little bit differently, some good, some bad with that. And I really had to figure out very quickly to understand and know that there's different approaches to doing things and there's different ways to success. Right.
Hmm.
And I think the biggest learning is that you're no longer producing results yourself. You're now relying on other people to produce results. And as a direct seller for 18 years, where my destiny was always under my control, when you become a manager of salespeople, your destiny is now in the control of others, right?
Good point.
Yeah. So I think that's the biggest difference. I think the biggest difference is two things. One, you have some assumptions about how things are done because you did it, you did the job.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden you're turning over your success to others. Your success now comes through others, you know? So I think that's the biggest difference.
Did you find one role more difficult? Selling versus leading?
I think leading is more difficult. I do. Because you're dealing with, before it was just me. I could figure out what I needed to do, and I'm one who does, and I would just go do it. But to figure out the motivation of others and help coach them and mentor them in a way that can be best for them, that's the hard work because everybody's different. I had 8 on my team, and every one of them was a different person with a different personality, with different challenges and issues, with different ways they needed to be taught something or communicated to. So those human elements of learning were super fun to figure out. I enjoy that kind of work. So it was fun, but challenging to say the least. That's the hard work of it. Is how do you help people excel, but also be a great boss that cares about them and has their best interest at heart, right? When we have goals we need to meet and objectives that are expected. Yeah, that's
Right.
always a challenge, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I could see that being a distinctly different challenge. Being a
Very
leader
different.
for people that you don't control, not
Nope.
really.
Mm-mm.
Whereas, and it's multiple people too, probably
Yeah,
if you're talking about a team. Whereas if you're selling, it's just you,
just me.
just
Yep.
you.
And, I manage a big geographic region where everybody, was miles, hundreds of thousands of miles away from me,
Hmm.
right? So it's not like you're in an office with people selling. You are reps that are down in New Mexico or out in Utah or in Texas, so they could be doing anything they wanted to any day without a boss breathing on their neck.
Huh. Right.
There's a
Right.
lot of independence there, which I respect tremendously. I think that's what salespeople are for. There has to be a lot of trust there, but that makes it even more tricky because you only have so many engagements a year where you're actually with them physically
Right.
to learn about them and what are the areas that you can help them with to be more successful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
The teams of ed reps that we're talking to right now, some of them are all local. Maybe they'll
Yeah.
come to the same store every night after running their route. Some are maybe bigger businesses with multiple states, with multiple locations. So maybe
Mhm.
their manager is many states away, like you
Right.
were describing. I can imagine it's extra challenging managing someone who you don't see more than twice a year.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's all about, again, back to sort of the first episode, it's about building relationships with people, right? So it's having really consistent connections and touch points. I always worked really hard to try to be the boss that when they saw the number on the phone, they weren't going, "Oh crap, my boss is calling me."
Or
I
I'm
think
in
if
trouble.
if the that's the impression someone has of their boss, is a big problem there.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, right. And I think we'll probably get into this, but to me, the most important lessons learned from sales management and leadership is everything hinges on trust. Everything.
Hmm.
The whole thing of leadership of people has to be built on trust. If trust is not there, then they're looking at the cell phone number, call from the boss, going, "Oh crap, my boss is calling me. I'm not going to answer," or they're just
Hmm.
getting a pit in their stomach, or they're not excited about that, as opposed to, "Hey, great, my boss is calling me. I have some stuff I want to share with him today."
Yeah.
Right?
Very
Or I'm gonna
different.
tell him about that call I just had, or I'm gonna talk through this problem that I'm dealing with that I'm struggling to find the answer for. So to me, that all hinges on trust. Everything does in leadership.
Hmm.
If you don't have trust with your people, then you can never solve the problems that need to be solved because they don't trust you. So they're not gonna share.
Right.
They
Let's
don't
dig into
share.
this.
Yeah.
This is a good topic. I mean, we talked
Yeah.
about trust in the other episode, right? But your
We did.
customers trusting the
Yep.
rep to make things
That's
happen.
that's not a there's an intention for that,
Right.
right? If sales starts with trust, then why wouldn't our relationships within our own organization also be contingent upon trust?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
So if you're a sales leader, I should ask this. I
Yeah.
just every time I say sales leader or sales manager, I think, is there a right way to say it? Do you have a
Right.
preference?
Well, I think there's a huge difference between a manager and a leader.
Okay.
Yeah. To me, a manager is someone who wants people to do stuff,
Hmm.
and a leader is someone who coaches, helps, supports others to become more than they thought they could be.
Those are very
Okay.
different definitions.
Very different definitions. Yeah.
Say it again.
A
That's good.
manager is someone who wants people to do stuff, check the box, do the role, accomplish the task. A leader is someone who wants who wants to help coach, motivate their people to become more than they thought they could be. And personally, I mean, I take that even further. I think that a leader needs to be involved and help in every area of someone's life. So it's not simply just for work; it's for whatever the need dictates. So there's a lot to that we could we could unpack, and I can go further into it. But I sort of have a philosophy around that I bring into my leadership that we can touch on in a bit.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think there's a huge difference, and there needs to be some management. So I'm not downplaying the need for management, because sometimes there are certain tasks that just simply require management. Hey, this was due. It needs to be done by this day. But when you've built trust and you're a leader,
Hmm.
typically management does not become a problem. Actually,
Yeah. Yeah. So let's get back to that. Let's get back to
yeah,
the building trust
right.
as a leader. What comes to mind with what you need to do as a leader to really build that trust with your team?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all starts with being authentic yourself. If you're not authentic, then who's going to trust you? And I always thought about it this way: for managers or leaders, we're often the conversation around the dinner table for the people that work for us.
Hmm.
And I always thought to myself, boy, what do I want that conversation to sound like? Too frequently, it's my boss is a jerk. He doesn't listen to me. He doesn't understand. I never see him. He doesn't respond. It could be a number of things, but too frequently that is actually the case, right?
Huh.
I've always wanted it to be, hey, my boss supports me. I know my boss has my back. My boss listens to me when I have something important that I need to share with him, even if I know it's not what he wants to hear. I think that's where trust starts, is through being authentic, and creating the space for the person for them to be authentic. They
Hmm.
should not have to be someone different in front of me as their boss as they would in front of anybody else. That's easier said than done, and I would not expect that to be 100% true ever. I know that people on my team would talk to each other about me and in a different way than they probably talk to me about me, which is totally understandable. That's how it rolls,
Sure.
But it starts with being authentic. If you're genuinely yourself and authentic, and someone who shows true care and concern for your people, that's how trust is built. That means a lot more than caring about their performance and what they can do for you or the company.
Hmm.
If that's all you care about, you're going to get what you get. You're going to get an employee who doesn't trust you or sees through that 100%.
Very, very true. It's a great point. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
how else is a leader going to build trust with their team?
Yeah. I think some other ways are recognizing where people are at. And here's what I mean by that. When I became a manager and moved out to Colorado, I was surprised that people didn't do things the same way I did them.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of managers or leaders might make assumptions about someone's skill set, where they're at in their development in the role, where they're at with their knowledge about how to perform in the role. And when assumptions are made about that, that's where disappointment comes in.
Huh.
Maybe, boy, I'm disappointed this person didn't do that. Instead of stepping back and saying, does this person know how to do that? Have they been appropriately taught how to do that? Do
Huh.
they need coaching and mentoring of how to do that? When you pause to ask those questions as a leader and then actually take the appropriate steps based on reflection, you build trust because you're saying, hey, you know what? I asked you to do something. And I was thinking, I don't think you've ever done that before. Gosh, that's not a fair ask of me. Let's get
Huh.
together and let's talk through how to do this. And I'm here to support you so you get it done in the best way so you can learn how to do this. Now all of a sudden trust is being built as well as skill is being built and as well as mentoring is happening.
Right.
Right?
Right. I imagine too, if there's a good level of trust there, then that salesperson would actually say, "Hey, I don't know how to do that." But if there's no trust, they'd be like,
Yes.
"I don't know how to do that,
A
and I'm not
hundred
going to bring it
percent.
up because I'm going to get in trouble." So,
100%. Yep. And you actually this points to the reason why trust is the cornerstone of all of it. Because if they don't have the freedom to speak and say that, then they're not gonna be as successful as they should be or could
hmm,
be,
hmm,
right? Because, "Oh, crap, I can't let my boss know I can't do that. I'm gonna wing it and just do it anyways." It's never gonna be done to the adequacy that it should be done if they would be honest and say, "You know what? Shoot, I'm not sure I know how to do this." And that kind of freedom to have with your boss can only happen with trust, right?
hmm.
When you're a safe person that you can say that to. But I would say this, that's a huge learning for me is that many people make assumptions about people's skill set because they're in a role, as opposed to assessing people's skill set and understanding where they're at and where they need help. Because a rep that's been doing something for 4 years is nothing like a rep that's been doing something for 20 years.
Hmm.
And we shouldn't expect them to be the rep that's been doing it for 20 years. So
Yeah.
let's dig into the hard work as a leader and mentor them and provide the skilled coaching needed to help them improve.
Huh.
That only happens if we give them the freedom and there's the trust there for them to sort of say, "Ooh, I'm struggling here. I can't do what you've asked me to do, I think adequately." Or, "Hey, here's how I did this. Is this the right way?" Like if they can't do that, you're actually never moving them forward. You're actually not helping them.
Yeah, that makes so much
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes so much sense.
But
Yeah.
those are some of the big areas. Those are big areas that I see that a lot of people struggle is they just make assumptions and then they come down as a hammer. Hey,
Yeah.
you didn't do X, or hey, why didn't you do that, or you didn't do this appropriately, as opposed to mentoring, coaching, doing the harder work of learning and understanding where your people are at, so you can appropriately lead them.
Yeah.
Yep,
I feel like there's a lot of assumptions made because of someone's job title.
100%.
Because they have this title, they must have this skill.
Yep.
It- hmm.
Yep, so that's just an example, one way an example. I think another really important one is to be very transparent of where I've made mistakes, right? And be very transparent of where I don't have the answers.
As a
That I'm
leader.
not yeah, as a leader, that, "Hey, I don't know it all. I'm, trying to figure it out just like the rest of you. But hey, here are my thoughts on this," or, "Hey, here's a strategy that I think makes sense. Let's talk this through." So I tend to be pretty collaborative in my approach to leadership. Not everybody, has that same collaborative approach. There are some things that I'm very certain of that I would speak to with 100% confidence. But when I'm not sure, I don't pretend I am. And when I've made a mistake, I want to make sure I freely admit that and make sure the team knows. Um,
Mm. Probably
but
shows you're human, right?
100%. Yeah. I'm no different than they are in that regard because all of us bring ourselves to work and we're all have strengths and weaknesses like everybody else.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Anything more on building trust with your team?
I think probably the last component of that, I mean, there's a lot to this, but when you show true interest in developing people, I think that develops trust. When people feel that that you've invested in them and that you actually care about, you have a desire for them to improve, to get better, not from a standpoint of you better improving it better, but from a standpoint of, hey, I want you to be all you can be.
Hmm.
I think when that's shown, trust is built as well.
Hmm. Can you give us some examples of something you might have done for your team to help them
Yeah.
to become all they can be? This is a really interesting topic.
Again, I think it really comes down to, at least in my world, of being very, very specific with individuals. So it's not like there's, hey, we're all going to do this. It's more like, hey, here's something I'm recognizing that it'd be helpful if we worked in this together.
Hmm.
So let's tackle this.
So it's very individualized, your
It's very
approach.
individualized.
Hmm.
An example is a rep I had sort of struggle with the quarterly business plan. So I had to basically sort of say, have you had to do these previously in the past? And it's like, no, I haven't. I'm like, well, my gosh, that's not a fair ask of me to have you do a quarterly business plan
Huh.
if you've never done one before. Let's do it together here. Just first go around here. I'll give you a template as a format that sort of you can put your thoughts down to give you a framework to start, and then we'll collectively do it together after you've sort of input some things that you think make sense, and then we'll sharpen it up and get it refined. So that was like round one.
Hmm.
Second quarter, it was like, okay, you're gonna tackle this now. You have a framework for it, but if you now need help along the way, reach out to me. But if you don't, you got it. So it was just sort of a process of doing it together, giving them more space, and then they were off and running from that there on. So that's sort of an example of just sort of a tactical thing that was done. A little bit more challenging example would be a guy who worked for me that had some anger issues.
Anger issues.
Anger issues, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Um, and I'd see them sort of pop up in certain situations that were just disproportionately didn't really require the anger that was sort of coming out.
Hmm.
So I just, you know, tried to have the opportunity to sort of talk to him about that. Like, hey, I notice in these certain situations, I'm seeing a level of anger that doesn't seem to resonate with what's really going on here. Help me understand what's giving you heartburn here. What's the issue?
Hmm.
You know? And actually over the years, when I got promoted, I actually hired him to be the manager, but it was through that conversation that we developed a different level of trust and friendship, quite frankly, because it was like, I I cared.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's really what it was. It was like, I'm seeing this thing and I care about you. What's going
Huh.
on?
So instead
Um,
of coming down hard and writing them up and sending them into HR, you worked with them
right.
because you cared.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
we corrected it. I mean, because it was an issue,
Yeah.
you know, right? And that was the intention, but it wasn't healthy for him, you know?
Hmm.
Um, it was a detriment to his ability to be successful.
Hmm.
Yeah. So those are like two sort of very divergent examples.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
But very specific
Yeah.
to that person.
So I think it's really understanding your people and having, quite frankly, a development plan for them, you know?
Hmm. What do you
And that's
mean
up
by development plan?
yeah, I think it's I guess I think performance reviews, annual performance reviews are the sort of the laughing joke within any company.
Huh.
It's
Why
like,
is that?
well, because they never really get to anything meaningful and it's just sort of checking the boxes, HR makes you do it and there's not a lot of meat or content to them. So I've always taken the model as opposed to a annual performance review that we'd have a consistent ongoing development plan with each of my team, where collectively we understand the strengths that they have and maybe some areas of opportunity for growth, maybe some weaknesses.
Hmm.
And through, honest and trust built, and through, the ability to have frank conversations, we put those on paper and we figure out, okay, what are some areas we want to work on together?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of scratching off the strong weaknesses. You're never going to really move the needle much with someone that has a real strong weakness in a certain area. So why focus on that? It's like if you improve a weakness 5%, it's still a weakness,
Right.
right? So I'm a fan of elevating strength and then finding areas that can be, you know, vastly improved. So hey,
Hmm.
these are strengths. Let's leverage the heck out of those and let's make them awesome. It's hard to make your strengths dramatically stronger. But what are those sort of middle areas that, boy, if we improve those areas, that would make a big difference for you professionally. So I was very intentional about that kind of development plan, but it was really
Yeah.
developed with them,
Yeah.
arm in arm, where we agreed that, hey, these are the strengths, these are the areas of opportunity. Here's my weaknesses. What are we going to tackle together?
Yeah.
And so then it was like the performance review then became just, we've been doing it all year long. So the performance review was redundant. Um,
That's a
but it was a
really
great,
interesting, very
yeah,
different approach. I'm just
yeah,
thinking about uh, uh, one of your sayings that we talked about in the last episode, process over outcome.
right.
It seems like in the performance review, you're talking about the outcome. You're
The
talking
outcome,
about the numbers. You're
right.
talking about, here's how you did versus your goal. And it sounds like with a development plan, you're actually talking about improving the process based on
Yes,
who they are and the
yes.
strengths and the weaknesses. That's awesome. I mean,
That's
that's a
exactly
totally
right.
different approach.
Yeah. And you're exactly right, because in sales, it's easy to focus on outcomes, and we all know those are the echoes of actions taken. So this idea of, how do we stay ahead of this all the time? Is through investing in the right actions and process, and I think that primarily comes through a development plan with people. Now, there's an awful lot of tactics involved in those things when you're talking sales, but again, how do you leverage your strength to best effect? How do you agree upon the areas that need improvement? When two people agree upon the areas that need improvement, you've eliminated the need for performance improvement,
Huh.
right? And if we're sort of doing these things and the results aren't coming, there's never a surprise of, hey, your results are coming. What are you doing? It's We've been doing these things all along from a development plan standpoint, looking at the results consistently. I don't know. I guess I'm always trying to think of, yeah, hey, how would I want to be managed if I'm in their shoes,
Hmm.
right? Wouldn't I would love to have a boss that came alongside of me and sort of said, "Hey, here are your strengths. Here are this. Let's figure out the areas of opportunity that we agree on that we can work on together to improve. And those weaknesses, listen, this one can be worked on, but I get it. You're not that guy, and we're not going to focus on that. You
Hmm.
know, so let's
Because
take it
everybody's
off the
different, right?
shelf, right? Because everybody's different.
Hmm.
Now obviously, if it's a glaring weakness, then they can't perform the job because of this weakness. It's a different story. But typically, we're talking about stuff that's like on the fringes. Like,
Yeah.
okay, if you were better at direct business development, but that's not your strength, so let's not worry about it. You're better at account management, and that's what we have you in the role for, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's through trial and error, and experience, that I've learned sort of a way to develop this with my people that I think creates great productivity, and it's valued by them. It's not something that's, oh crap, I got a development plan because of an issue. No, you have a development plan because you want to improve and you want to develop, right?
Hmm.
And I found it very productive and meaningful. I think that's actually helping lead people in that regard, as opposed to manage their tasks.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Such a different approach.
Yep.
There's something you and I have talked about that I'd really like for you to dig into, and that's the core principles.
Yeah.
Speaking of developing people in different parts of a person,
Right.
I'd love for you to go into this.
Yeah. This really comes from this sort of core philosophy that I have, and I know we've chatted a little bit about this, Shane. I think it's probably a different approach than you're going to hear from most. I call it the triple bottom line sort of leadership philosophy. Is what I've sort of ended up calling it. the bottom line is always the bottom line. We know we have a job to do. We have numbers we need to hit. We have revenue expectations the company is aiming for, and sales is the driver of that revenue. So that's the bottom line. But I think there's three other more important components that actually are more consistently and more long term contribute to the true bottom line of a company, and that is caring about the development of our people in their relational life, their physical life, and their mental, spiritual, psychological life, however you want to frame that last one. And I think when people know that they're cared for the entirety of who they are,
Hmm.
they actually bring more to work, quite frankly.
Huh.
When they know that you personally and the organization cares about their physical well-being and their relational well-being and their mental, spiritual, emotional well-being, I think that really matters tremendously. So I've always shared with my team that here's my core philosophy. These are the things that are important to me because I think these are the cornerstones of a successful life. When you have those three sort of pillars fairly well grounded, you're a happier, more stable person,
Hmm.
which means you're going to bring that happiness and stability to work.
Right. Can you say those three pillars again?
Yeah. So it's your physical well-being. So your physical existence. Are you taking care of yourself? Do you have health issues that need to be addressed or concerns that need to be known about? Your relational well-being. Are you surrounding yourself with good people that take care of you and help you and have your back? Connected with friends that matter. If you're married or have a partner, are you investing in that? It's easy to let those things erode, and those are the things that create tremendous value in our life and need to be prioritized.
Hmm.
And then the last one is your mental. I really focus on the mental life because I'm not going to get into people's spiritual life or deep into their emotional life necessarily. But are you always learning? Are you someone who is always learning and eager to learn and reads or listens to podcasts or audiobooks? Because I think keeping the mind sharp is really, really important. There's always something new to learn. So in the specifics of that, it's, hey, take care of yourself physically. So I was always encouraging my team, what are you doing? Are you spending some time working out, even if it's just 5-10 minutes?
Hmm.
Are you doing something? Are you getting up and moving throughout the day? Hey, take a break, take a walk. So as a leader, those are the kind of things I'd be reminding the team of. Hey,
Hmm.
you know what? Put a half hour in today to get a walk in. So you get up from behind your desk. I know we have a full day of a lot of calls today, but make sure you bake that in your. So that's a tactical, practical way I could exemplify that through leadership. I may send them an invite and say, "This is your walk half hour." You know
Huh.
what I mean? Right. You know, or I send them articles about, "Hey, here's a simple physical fitness thing you can do that's just takes 5 minutes." You know, or it might be like one of my person had some health issues to make sure that I totally had his back, and if he needed to be gone for any period of time, that I could take care of anything he needed to be taken care of.
Hmm.
So that's an example of just the practical reality of how do you sort of lead thinking of their physical well-being.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that connects to everything, right? If you don't feel good, if your body
Right.
just doesn't feel good, everything else is harder.
If you're in poor health, nothing else matters.
Mhm.
Honestly, I mean, like if you're have some significant disease that's limiting you physically, there's nothing else you care about except for getting that taken care of and fixed.
Hmm.
Honestly,
Hmm.
right? So that's why I think it's such an important pillar. Because if you're not showing concern about that, then why should they even care about work? Quite frankly, if they're dealing with a significant issue.
Right.
The second one, the relational life, that's always a little bit tricky. I mean, I think that takes time to understand your people and to build a relationship with them where you understand their maybe their family relational dynamics that they have. But I'm always just encouraging them to, hey, invest with people that matter. I have this idea that you're sort of the average of their 5 closest friends. So who you surround yourself with matters tremendously. Um,
Hmm.
so you're with people that help you grow? Are you with people that challenge you to step out and to do new things? Are you with people that push you in a way that's fun and engaging for you? We're fortunate to have that kind of friend group here in the neighborhood, Shane.
Mhm.
Which is great. But I think that's really important because people bring the relational baggage to work.
Right.
You're right. Um, so how do you have awareness of their challenges and help them in any way you can as their leader?
I could also see that being difficult and tricky, yeah,
It is.
especially if you're a really great leader that people really trust. They might tell you things
Mhm.
that they don't tell other people.
You bet. Right.
What do you do then?
I think it's all about, again, trust, right? That you are that safe place to have a conversation that might be off the record, so to speak, from a work standpoint.
Hmm.
But if you are concerned about trying to help them resolve an issue or get something fixed, I think that's or point in the right place. Often we're not the ones fixing it. That's not what we can do. But I'll give you an example. I actually had someone reach out to me yesterday that was a former employee of mine that wanted to talk through her current role and maybe making a change. And we had a really great, very meaningful conversation about that. Um, and she shared some very specific things about some challenge she's facing, and it was a great conversation. But it was through that trust built that she could call me
Mm-hmm.
and sort of say, "Hey, I want to talk this through with you." And there's nothing I can do to fix any of that, but we could certainly I could help her process her thinking and to say, "Gosh, I think how you're thinking about this makes sense," and I could see you. I could see you doing what you're suggesting. You know, so it
Hmm.
was. I think so. I think it's more as an ear to hear as opposed to a person to solve their problems because
Hmm.
that's not what we can be doing. Um, but at least to create the space where you can be someone that can be an ear to be heard, and to many of time I'd be consulting HR and providing resources back to the people that, hey,
Huh.
I talked with our HR person and here's 3 resources for you, that you can utilize that we provide as a company, you know.
Hmm.
But many share that stuff in silence with their boss, and that's unfortunate. I don't think that's the way work should be,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So that's sort of my leadership philosophy is approaching the whole person and looking at them and having them understand that I value them as a whole person. I think that's really the core of it. I mean, I call
Hmm.
it the triple bottom line leadership philosophy is what I call that. I made
Yeah.
it up. So
That's awesome. That's
I'm sure
awesome.
this is nothing new. These aren't new ideas that are not been thought of at all. These are prevalent and quite frankly very common. But just thinking about how do you apply these principles to work, I think is the more important thing because I think it matters.
Right. So
Yeah,
much of what you talk about in this episode and the previous one
yeah,
for sales reps to their customers, it's just about being a good human.
it is
That's
100%.
what it boils down to, doesn't it?
It does. I think that's the absolute number one business asset any company has is their people. So you better hire good people and people with integrity, people that are well adjusted, people that bring positivity to what they do, that work hard. Of course, that's always part of it. But getting good people, you can teach good people anything tactically or
Hmm.
anything product related. You can give them knowledge, but you can't teach a bad person how to be good.
Right. Right. That's something that
Or you
leaders.
certainly can, but it would take an awful lot of time and you'll be killing yourself.
Right. Right.
Right.
The topic of hiring good sales reps is something that leaders have to do, right?
They
And
do.
that's probably a whole episode in itself in a different podcast. But in this
Yeah.
in this setting here, how do you as a leader who in charge of hiring,
Right.
looking for the best sales reps you can get for your company? What have you learned over the years? What's a good process? What's something to look out for? Questions to ask, that kind of thing.
I mean, number 1 is look for good people. I mean, good people at heart and at the core. That's
Hmm.
number 1. I mean, if you get that right, you're more than halfway there,
Huh.
right? I'd much rather hire a good person with no experience than a person has has concerns about them with a lot of experience,
Hmm.
you know? Because especially in the world I came from where it was about building relationships within distribution in the marketplace, a negative person will not last and what can create long-term damage in a marketplace.
Hmm. Even if
Um,
they have a lot of experience and they've been around the block and they have
100%.
connections, if they're negative, it just won't work out.
Yep. If
Hmm.
they're negative or don't bring the right attitude or don't bring a service mindset, because we're working with distribution, it's really in service to distribution.
Hmm.
Much like you and your job with your people,
Sure.
you're serving distribution.
Yeah.
If the distribution has questions or doesn't like the person that's calling them, you're never going to have success with them ever.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So to me, it's always starting with trying to get to the core of who the person is, what are their values, what type of are they high in unquestionable integrity, are they honest to a fault, do they bring a warmth and connectedness to their engagements, are they authentic, are they themselves? So those are sort of the big ones. I There's certainly certain questions you can't ask from HR standpoint when hiring,
Hmm.
being a publicly traded company that I came from. But I try to understand a lot about their background. Hey, when did you first start working? If they said, yeah, middle school, I got a job cutting grass, or I always like to sort of see those types of things that show they have a background of hard work, of having ownership. Because in sales, you have to have ownership. You have to have a drive of ownership to be successful in sales. I try to understand their sort of family dynamics as appropriately as possible, because I think that's important too. Are they committed to their family, and is there a solid base there? I think that matters,
Mm.
I do. But then it's just all the tactical stuff. What's their experience? Tell me about the success you've had. What are your biggest challenges or obstacles you had to overcome? I look for a growth mindset a lot. So I'll ask an awful lot of growth mindset questions. Tell me about this thing you're most proud of. What challenge and obstacles have you had to overcome that you've made you the most proud?
Hmm.
Personally and professionally. I like to always ask personally and professionally, because the personal one's always really interesting. Because I'm trying to see, do they have a growth mindset if they had to face obstacles and challenges, and if they overcome that, which all of us have, but some of us are better at articulating that and having something that was more meaningful and made something different from it than others, right?
Hmm.
So that's sort of my approach, but it always starts with the values and the essence of a person, and having that kind of right perspective to be successful in the world that I needed for sales. Other sales roles, they might need someone that's hyper aggressive, that can do 30 calls a day
Hmm.
and needs to turn off their brain and not worry about every no. And that's very different than the
Yeah.
world I came from.
Yeah. The closer.
The closer, right?
Yep.
But still, no one wants to work with jerks. So I have a
Oh,
no
yeah.
jerks policy, because I think that life's too short to work with people that are rude or
Mhm.
don't treat each other kindly. I think kindness is probably the most undervalued business asset people have, is just being kind.
Mm. It just keeps coming up, doesn't it? Just being a good human,
Right.
being a good person.
It's not that complicated, but it's
Yeah.
surprisingly how wrong we get that too frequently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what are some red flags? Again, on the topic of hiring as a leader, looking for a sales force.
Oh boy. I mean, it's tricky because there's a lot you can't get into with HR requirements these days. Like, you don't
Mm.
even ask for references anymore,
Hmm.
because who gives a bad reference, right?
Right.
But to me, I always try to mine for people that know the person, to give me the real scoop about who they are. I do some mining for that. I'm in a pretty tight industry, so you can always find someone who worked with someone else, and they'll be like, "Yeah, that's a good soul. You'll love that person," or like, you know. Um,
Hmm.
so I'm pretty intentional about that, because that's where you really find the truth, is when you talk to someone that's, you know, a little bit removed from people. But I always back it up. I wouldn't just take the advice of one. I think additionally, is people that sort of focus a little bit too much on themselves throughout the process
Hmm.
is always a red flag to me.
Me throughout
Yeah.
the interview.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And that's a balance, because, accomplished salespeople need to have confidence and toot their own horn. I think that's appropriate. But there's a fine line there between, hey, I accomplished X, Y, and Z, versus someone who's a little bit more too self-focused. So I try to sort of weed that out. I have
Yeah.
a number of pages of interview questions I've gathered over the years that sort of mine for these things.
Hmm.
Like, tell me about a person you work with that you couldn't stand, Then the inverse of that is, tell me about someone who you worked with who couldn't stand you.
Oh, I
Hey,
bet you get
why
some interesting answers on those.
what was the rub there,
Huh.
So, so I have a lot of questions that try to sort of get to these things that are the deeper things, to understand who they really are, and what type of the person are they gonna be in the team to work with,
Yeah.
and for our distribution to work with,
Yeah.
Yeah,
When you're hiring for sales, you're talking about people who have to work with people.
right.
It's an entirely different skill set than can you code this program for this
Exactly.
website alone in your office. It's very
Yep.
different when you're talking about human
Yeah.
interactions.
Yep, totally. And I think this hits too on another, is just sort of core philosophy of leadership that I have, and that is the culture is everything. Within an organization, culture eats strategy for breakfast is a famous quote by Peter Drucker.
Say it again.
Culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Uh-huh.
And Peter Drucker was like a 20th century business educator, one of the most pronounced guys in the business world from a education standpoint. But I always love that from him because I think that's so true. It's like you can have the best strategy in the world, but if your culture sucks, the strategy is not going to amount to much.
Yeah. No one will be excited to implement that strategy, will they?
Nope. You got to have people that believe, that rally, that have each other's back, that go the extra mile. And that all comes from culture. It doesn't come from strategy.
And where does culture come from?
It comes from being very intentional with the kind of people you hire.
Huh.
You're right. If you hire people that are contrary to the culture you're creating, you're going to erode your culture. Right.
Good point.
So it's all about what type of people are going to build the culture that I want. Are we a collaborative group? Are we, do we have each other's back? Do we go the extra mile for one another? Do we have the success of everybody else is top of mind, and we get thrilled when others succeed? And even if we don't, to me, those are all the big things that build the right kind of culture for organization, because when you have those kind of people, that they know how to work together. And business is all about solving problems. Quite frankly, that's really all business is. It's about solving the problems before us, because there always will be some. And if you don't have people that can support one another, work collectively in a way that everyone can get along, you're going to struggle to solve problems. And that's really what business is. It's solving problems. I mean, that's all sales is. It's solving problems.
Right.
Helping others solve a problem for the solution that you have that you're going to sell them,
So what's the connection with culture and sales team morale?
Yeah. I think it's huge because it sort of exemplifies those sort of core things I mentioned there. Do we rally behind around each other? Do we support each other when someone needs support freely? Do we cheer for one another when there's success? Do we support each other when there's challenges? Do we readily provide insight for someone who's needing to learn something differently? Do we say, "Hey, I'll call you and fill you in on something I learned here"? I think having a whole team that's sort of the mindset of the team is a cultural thing, as opposed to an individual seller that's out there and they're on their own. And some companies have that culture. Hey, you guys are fighting it out among yourselves. There are no accounts. Whoever gets it first gets it. It's a knife fight among their own reps. I've seen companies like that. Adversarial, exactly. I don't think that's a healthy culture. I mean, I guess there's no right or wrong culture. It's whatever culture you want your culture to be. I believe there's right or wrong cultures personally, but everybody's going to have a different take on that. That's fine. If you want a, Darwinian approach to culture where the strong eat the weak, and you hire the right kind of people that are going to thrive in that, I guess that's okay. I just wouldn't want to work there myself, and I don't know many people that would.
Right. Right. Not for long, at least.
Not for long.
Yeah.
If that's the case, you better be willing to pay an awful lot of money to people to make up for the hot mess that will be, but some people are selfish and only want to get what's theirs. And that's not who I'd be looking for. 'Cause I do think the right culture matters tremendously for the sustaining long-term impact of a company.
Yeah.
And that goes to the sort of the whole carrot and stick thing from a leadership standpoint or management standpoint as well. I think there's a lot of leaders that think the stick is the right approach, and I strongly disagree with that. I think that there's sometimes a stick is needed for eminent short-term tasks that need to be accomplished, and there might be deadlines, and there is no other option. But a stick is a short-term thing that never creates good long-term results.
So you're talking about a stick you beat somebody with to motivate them to get them to do something, right?
As opposed to a carrot, which is a good thing. I think that the carrot is always the long-term approach to build healthy culture, not the stick. And any company built with a stick is the motivator. Is if you have to motivate salespeople with a stick, then you don't have the right people anyways, quite frankly. Or the right leaders leading them.
Right.
There has to be a different way to develop people, and that's what comes down to developing people. Right?
Yeah.
It's the lazy approach to development. is the stick, and half the time when the stick is pulled out, it's because people aren't properly trained to do something anyway. So
Yeah, good point.
they don't know how
Yeah.
to do it, so they're putting it off or they're not doing it. So and instead of asking and getting that trust, because trust wasn't built because the stick is being used.
Yeah. So we've been talking about, mostly very
Uh,
positive things about leaders and great building great culture, working with your people, understanding them and all that. Let's flip it over to the not great side of
yeah,
leadership. It's hard. And most leaders will say it's hard. Like you said earlier, it's harder than being a salesperson.
it is.
So what are some things that leaders may inadvertently get wrong, or maybe their managers, some sort of role within the company with people under them? What are some things to watch out for to not inadvertently do to have negative consequences in your sales team?
Yeah, well, I think number one is just all the inverse of all that I just said.
Yeah, the
I mean,
opposite of everything you said. Yeah.
it is. If you're not investing time building trust, whether that's with people that, so if people aren't sharing how you're solving problems that there exist in their world, right?
Hmm.
And people that don't trust you don't share because they're, hey, I better not let my boss know I don't have this skill down or this capacity or this challenge. So I think it goes back to the, quite frankly, lack of building trust, because you can't solve problems you don't know about. And the
Hmm.
only way you can know about problems is if trust is built so people freely share with you. So I think that's the biggest one, from my experience. I mean, I just know from personal experience from having bosses where trust was not built that it shuts people down and you don't want to share with them. It's just, it's not a safe place to. So all kinds of problems percolate up when that's the case, and the ripple effect of that is unfortunate. So I think that's the biggest one. Um, I think the second biggest one, which I are also mentioned too, is assuming people know how to do things.
Hmm.
I think a lot of managers, because you hired someone with a certain background, assume they might know how to do certain things. And the hard work of leadership is understanding people's skill set and creating the trust where that can be discussed. So if someone doesn't have the skill set, you can actually help them learn it, you
Hmm.
know, and set appropriate expectations with that person. And I'll give you an example of this. Let's say there's two people on your team. One's a 15-year employee, has been doing the job for all those years and hasn't mastered. The other is only 2 years in. If you send them both a similar task and expect a similar result from them, that's a failure of leadership,
Hmm.
right? Generally speaking, you should expect the 15-year-old employee to have a different result for whatever you ask them for. If it's something this complex and takes some effort and some thought to it, you know? So as a leader, it might be, hey, this person's got this kind of task down, needs very, very little coaching. It might be a phone call to them. Hey, I know you're working on this thing. Whatever you need from me, give me a holler. Happy to talk it through with you and provide any assistance I can. Boom, done. For that 2-year employee, it might be, hey, you have this task in front of you. We're going to want to sit down and talk this through together. We want to make sure you fully understand what's needed, sort of the expectations around it. Hey, I'm here to help you even do the work this time around because you haven't done it before.
Hmm.
But what I see is a lot of managers sort of don't create those distinctions. They broadly send things or have expectations for the team
Hmm.
without recognizing the place people are at and the type of coaching or the lack of coaching needed. The last thing a seasoned person wants is a manager breathing down their neck, quite frankly. They just want to be left around. They don't know how to do the job. My job is to get the heck out of their way and provide support when it's needed. For that newer employee, if I was to do that to them, I'm setting them up to fail,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So it's recognizing where people are at so you can effectively coach them and help them be successful, you
Hmm.
know?
Hmm. So even those two people probably have the same job title that you were talking
Same
about,
job
right?
title.
But
Yeah,
totally different place in their
totally
path
different
along
place.
that job.
Yep.
Yeah.
The Blanchard group, Ken Blanchard, he wrote the 1 Minute Manager. They provide some really great training on this stuff,
Hmm.
and they basically break employees and leaders down into 4 quadrants. Where a brand new employee starting a new role is going to be in quadrant one. A um, employee certain phases going to be in quadrant two, then quadrant three, and quadrant four. Quadrant three and four employees don't need a lot of engagement from their manager. they need to be known that their boss is there to support them, provide the needed support, and any help and coaching needed along the journey. 3, a little bit more in certain things. 4, pretty much they're running free.
Hmm.
They got the job mastered. They know what they're doing. Their boss doesn't need to be a nuisance. Their boss needs to be support as needed, right? 1 and 2 need a ton of coaching and support from their manager. And sort of recognizing where your people are, I think is probably one of the most important things as a leader. Because it can send those 1 or 2 employees either to success or to the place they want to quit pretty quickly. If a boss is making assumptions or not providing needed support and coaching and mentoring and leadership to develop them into 3s and 4s, right? The intention is to develop every employee or work them out of a job because maybe it's recognized that this isn't the right place for them. There's some of that in leadership too. But that's part of that process as well, is that natural recognition, hey, this isn't the right role for you. And no one ever wants to have to let someone go or have that kind of situation. That's never fun. But it's the best thing for that person to find the place where they can flourish and thrive, right? And you do that through process, through navigating their skill set, creating a development plan, leading them appropriately within the place they're at in their development, as opposed to, hey, you got the job, go get them. And maybe there's only the second job they've had. It's a similar role, but they're only 3 years experienced, and you have a 10-year team of 10 plus years experienced people, and you're going, this person's not performing like my other people. What's the problem?
First sales job. Maybe they know the topic, but they never sold.
Yeah. Yep. So I think leadership just requires that kind of hard work to take the thought to understand who your people are, where they're at, what are their needs to help them perform at their best. And that's that idea of perform at their best and even do more than they thought they possibly could comes into play. A manager wants people to perform a task. Go out and do that, check the box. What I'm talking about is developing people into something more than they thought that it could even be capable of, right? So all this sort of philosophy flows into that core bottom line result is helping people in service to them because you have the privilege to lead them, right? And gosh, that's a failure of leadership if you're not developing them into the best they can be. It's a failure of leadership, you know? Many of us are overworked, so this is a hard thing to keep front and center because we all have a million things to do, but it's the most important thing any company can do. If you get this kind of thing, these things right, it will not only change you as a leader, but it will change your people and your organization as well.
I could see that.
Yeah.
I bet you were fantastic to work for, Andy.
Well, I tried real hard to be, you know. Yeah. It was through a lot of failure and mistakes for sure and learning. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
Well, yep.
You've got some experience that you've learned from. I'm so grateful that you're sharing it with everybody. This is just such good stuff.
Yeah, I've had some great mentors that have really been a blessing to me to talk this stuff through with. You're certainly one of those too, Shane. It's fun for you and I to sort of chew in this stuff. One of my great friends, Kevin Sherman, is a guy that I talk deeply about this stuff because he's a CEO of a company and ran a startup. So he's sitting there live trying to figure this stuff out. Starting a company, hiring people. How do you build the right culture? So it's about having important people in your life and relationships that challenge you, that make you think about stuff in different ways that really makes a big difference. So it's not my musings on my own. It's through the input of others that have made me think about these things deeply with others that have, and the experience have given me some conclusions to things that I think make a lot of sense.
Right.
And just knowing how people work and where they want to work and how much disappointment you hear with people talking about their jobs, that's really unfortunate. That should not be the case.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Right? It's really a shame when people say, I work for this terrible company or my boss is terrible and it's miserable and I hate it every day. I mean, that's not what any of us want for our life. So how do we be contributors to making sure that's not the case? As leaders, that's on us. Right? Yeah.
That's awesome. You have developed some mantras
Yeah.
over your time that I want to close this with. If you can go
Cool.
through some of these, I love them. And
Yeah.
then some of these I think were in the other episode
Right.
as well, but worth repeating.
Yeah. So I do. I sort of have, these mantras that I repeat with my team, sort of really consistently because I think they're good ones to always focus on. Most companies have a lot going on, and it's easy to be distracted. So I have sort of mantras that I think are just good go-tos. One is people before strategy.
People
Is that
before
people
strategy.
before strategy? People always need to be put first. You can't execute any kind of strategy without the right people in place. If you're starting something new, you put the people in first, and then you build the strategy with the people.
Hmm.
If you already have people in place, or you already have a strategy, then you want to make sure that you surround yourself with the right kind of people that support that strategy. But it's
Hmm.
best to start with people first
Hmm.
before you do strategy, because then you have to have it right. But if it's always people first, though, because that's what the strategy is going to be executed from is the people.
Right.
Secondly, is consistency over intensity. And I always give this analogy. I'm an endurance athlete. So is Shane. Well, I'm a pretend endurance athlete. And this idea that you can only operate in high level heart zones for short periods of time.
Hmm.
So if you're sprinting, there's a reason why you can only sprint for short periods of time because it maxes out your heart rate.
Right.
And I think that for business, is consistency is the most important thing over intensity. We're always going to have short spurts of high intensity when something needs to be accomplished, but this consistency and the ability to sustain our plan and our strategy is where results really flourish.
Mhm. So
People get
think
burnt.
marathon over sprinting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Think ultra, marathon, you name it.
Right.
I think that's especially for sales. It truly is about consistency, especially in this kind of sales Shane and I are in, where relationships are so paramount. It's about consistency and building those relationships, what really matters. The next one is fundamentals over fads. It's easy to get caught up in the new shiny thing or the next thing or the next thing. I see a lot of companies that change their sales strategy. Oh, that's not working. Let's change it. That's not working. Let's change it.
Hmm.
It's always about mastering the fundamentals, the blocking and tackling. When you have those down, then new things can be implemented through the fundamentals. But I'd see a lot of companies that hop on every fad or change their marketing strategy too consistently and don't allow the fundamentals to be rock solid base that this built from. So
Hmm.
fundamentals over fads. The next one is process over outcomes. And another way to say that is that outcomes are the echoes of actions taken.
That's awesome.
And we all know that the process is what produces the outcome. It's easy, especially in sales, to always be focusing on the outcome, the results. It's the process that got those results. So focus on that. Focus on the process. That's
Hmm.
largely where I spend my time now with companies, is helping them make sure they have the right processes in place to produce the outcomes they want. It's amazing how many companies don't have processes in place for their sales team, or even goals, or even quotas, or anything like that.
Huh.
You'll If you don't have a goal, you'll hit it every time. Right? And then my last one here is motivation follows action.
Hmm.
And I've learned this the hard way because I tend to be someone who tries to get myself motivated, and you can't try to get yourself motivated, quite frankly. You act yourself into being motivated through action. And I always give this idea that I never feel like working out, but I feel great after I work out.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Yeah. You have to
Right?
drag
And
yourself to the gym or drag yourself
yep,
out to go running.
right. And I don't want to make that sales call, but gosh, I made it. And what a great sales call that was.
Huh.
And I give this great story. I'll tell this story because I love this. I love this story so much. A gal that worked for me years ago was out in the day making her sales calls, and she had emails were piling up, and she had one more call she wanted to make, and it was at an architect firm, and she pulled into the parking lot, and she's like, her phone's beeping away, and she's like, I don't have time for this last call. I'm out of here. And she pulls away, and about 2 miles down the road, she's like, damn it, I said I was going to make this call today. I'm going to go back and make that call. So she went back to the firm, and she never called these people before. So it was a
Huh.
brand new call, which is always, always tricky, right? When you walk into the place for the first time. Like 2 years later, it's actually one of our biggest supporters. I think we got two multi-million-dollar projects from that architect firm because
Wow.
she made that one call, right?
Right.
So again, motivation follows action. We don't motivate ourselves to action. We get to work, and that's where the motivation comes in. Not always. We're never going to
Hmm.
be, highly motivated all the time, but more times than not, it's the action that motivates us, and not the universe. So that's sort of my mantras.
Love them.
That I think are good ones that I sort of have on the wall on my wall here and repeat consistently, because I think they're ones that make a lot of sense, not only for work but for life.
Yeah, so true.
Yep.
So I know you're an avid reader, and you had a couple books that you suggested in the other episode. I'm curious if you have some suggestions for the same books or different books on the topic of leadership specifically.
I have two. I have some. Actually, I have four. I have some different ones for this group too that I think are really good books to some good suggestions.
Okay.
One is Good to Great by Jim Collins. That's one I'm sure most have heard of. It's sort of a benchmark of developing a company and leadership, which I think is really good. Good to Great, Jim Collins.
Okay.
Anything by Patrick Lencioni.
What's the name?
Patrick Lencioni. I can send you that, Shane.
Okay.
He's with the Table Group. They're a consulting company out of San Francisco that really helps companies with cultural development. He's written like 5 Signs of a Miserable Job, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, Working Genius. So he's written a number of books around cultural development, how to develop the right culture. He's just really good. It's really good stuff. I love everything he does. I would say anything by Ken Blanchard. Ken Blanchard wrote the 1 Minute Manager, but the Blanchard Group is a great consulting company that does leadership training, all kinds of stuff. But anything by Ken Blanchard is really, really good. And then Atomic Habits, which I mentioned in the last one, by James Clear. Atomic Habits is really about just forming how small little habits have fantastic, huge long-term impact and can make great change. As I told the last podcast in our last hour, this idea of if I was to tell you to get 36.5% better this year, we would all sort of choke on that. But the idea of getting 1% better every day is actually achievable. And actually, that would be 36.5% better in a year if you did that.
You're right.
So that's Atomic Habits. That comes directly from Atomic Habits. This idea of small change has really a huge impact. And it's a great book. I mean, I've read it probably 5 times. Then the last one I would suggest is The Go-Giver Leader by
It's
Bob
different
Burg.
from The Go-Giver?
It's different. It's the Go-Giver Leader book. Yeah. And it's really about how giving is the actual way to success, not only as a salesperson, but as a leader. So those are sort of some that I recommend. I think that would be appropriate and sort of hit on some of the where I got a lot of my thinking from is from this sort of collective group, plus an awful lot more. I have a smorgasbord of thoughts from a lot of people thrown into this mix. But yeah, those are some that I'd recommend.
All right. I'll put the links to those books in the program notes so anybody can go easily find those books, or to the Blanchard Group's site or something like that. But I'll make it easy to find.
And I'll send you Patrick Lencioni's name because I know it's a little bit tricky to spell that last name.
Yeah. And also in the program links, I will put information on how to get a hold of Andy with his new role. And anybody would be lucky to work with him. I just know from so many great discussions with this gentleman on this topic and so many more. He's outstanding at what he does and a real, genuine human being who I think will help anybody in this topic of leadership and in sales. So I'll put that in program notes so you can reach out easily.
Yeah, thanks, Shane.
Yeah, thanks again, Andy. That was fantastic.
That's been great. I really appreciate the conversation. It was fun to sort of talk through this stuff. And this all happened because Shane and I had lunch and we started talking about it. And he's like, we got to do a podcast in this. And I'm like, let's do it. It'd be fun.
Yeah. Glad it worked out.
Yep. Awesome.
All right. Thanks again.
You bet.
We hope you found the information in this episode useful and something you can use in your everyday life as an ed rep. If there is a topic you'd like to learn more about and have presented on a future episode of Ed Rep Radio, or you'd like to give us some feedback in general, please email us at edrepradio@eastmanstrings.com. To learn more about Eastman Music Company, go to our website, eastmanmusiccompany.com, or give your Eastman rep a call. Thanks, and drive safe.